React tooling and just some different tools that we use with React to make our lives as developers a little bit better. First thing we're going to talk about is create React app, to boilerplate a React application, and then we will talk about prop types and type checking in a React app. Tomorrow we're going to get into lifecycle methods. So this is pretty involved. There's a lot. This lesson is basically how a React component, what a React component does from the time that it gets mounted on the screen to when it gets unmounted and pulled off of the screen. And all the little steps in between. There's a lot that happens in the lifecycle of a React component. So we're going to be going over all of that tomorrow. Wednesday is a fun day. Wednesday is fun, okay? I want you to say that 10 times in the mirror every morning this week when you wake up. Wednesday will be fun. Wednesday will be fun. Just kidding. It's not too bad. So we're going to be talking about higher order components on Wednesday, and which is a very advanced React pattern. So just to give you an expectation for this today before we get there, this is the only time that we're really going to be building our own higher order components through the entire React content. So it's tough. It like bends your mind a little bit and really, really pushes you. On Wednesday, it's really hard, but that's really the only thing we're going to be doing with higher order components as far as building custom ones. So when we come to the sprint project this week, this is not going to be a part of your sprint project. When we go into the project week in a couple weeks, you will not be expected to build higher order components. So we'll kind of kick your butts a little bit on Wednesday, just in this lesson, but don't stress too much because it's just exposure to this concept. And we don't expect you to be able to be proficient, any kind of professional at building higher order components. That being said, as you finish React and as you continue on in Lambda, even after you finish Lambda and you're working in as a React developer, if that's what you choose to do, this is a great thing to, at that point, start to study and get used to. So then after we have a tough Wednesday, we're going to come into Thursday and talk about CSS and JS and talk about styled components. And at that point, it's like, oh, okay, a little break from the crazy Tuesday, Wednesday that we had. So get ramped up. Today and Thursday are a little bit lighter lessons. Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be a little bit tougher. Cool. So let's go to today's stuff. React tooling, the different tools that we use to make our lives as React developers a little bit easier. The project for today is this React InstaClone project. So this is a 4-day project. We're going to be working on this all week, and you'll take what you learn from the lesson each day and you'll build a little bit more out in this project. So for today, we're basically going to, you'll start up your project with Create React App. You'll build out the component structure and the file structure. You'll have your files all set up. And then you'll take the data that we have in this dummy data file, and you'll pass that down to the components that need the data. And then you'll just render some Instagram posts to the DOM. So pretty straightforward today. It's kind of what we've done up to this point all last week. Taking data, rendering it to the page. The biggest difference is you are going to be starting your project by running Create React App to start up your project. And then tomorrow we'll get into like click functionality and different things, but we'll go over that more tomorrow. Let's take a look at what do we have a, oh, that's for day 2. I was gonna say I thought we had a design spec for what it is. Oh, okay, here we go. So this is, let me zoom back a little bit. This is kind of what the app looks like. We've got 3 different posts in that dummy data file. So you'll make a header, you'll make a post container, and then you'll have comments and these 2 icons here. And then we'll get to the point that you can add comments. I think that comes tomorrow, adding a comment and seeing it add to the comment list. So that's what our project's going to be this week. I know those who worked on the React curriculum during the break built a really cool version of this Instagram project. So they can post the link for you, and you can check out what they built. They did a really great job. It's a fun project. So yeah. All right. React tooling, Create React App. So we're going to talk about using Create React App. We call it, we shorten it to CRA. I'm sure it's in here quite a bit as CRA. We're going to talk about using Create React App to boilerplate a React application. So what the heck does boilerplate even mean? Can anyone explain boilerplating an application? And while you guys are typing, I'm going to answer this quick question. So John asked, is this the same concept with higher order functions? It's similar. We'll talk about that on Wednesday, though, when we get there. Okay, so boilerplating an application means like get it started, to start the foundation of the application. Yeah, I like that. The foundation of the application. It's the template that includes the basics you need to get started. Cool. And then that word template again, setting up basic file structure for React development environment. Good. Pre-written code to speed up creation. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Things you need to make the app run. So everything you need to like actually start building features. Yeah, all the stuff that we did for you last week. We'll do some more. There's some projects next week that we boilerplate things for you and say go build this, and then there's more projects where you get to boilerplate, set up the boilerplate. I like to think of it as kind of the scaffolding. We set up the foundation, the template. There's some pre-written code that is set up so that you can actually like start working on your project. Now, we're at a really great point in the front-end development world, where we have things like Create React App to boilerplate a lot of our setup stuff for us. If you look into Vue.js.org, I think. If you look at Vue.js, they actually have a really, really cool tool to help you boilerplate an application. Vue.js CLI. So yeah, check, like if you want to get into Vue, this is where you would start. With React, you start with Create React App. With Vue, you start with this CLI tool. They even have like an entire GUI interface that will run everything for you. Yeah, what they have is really cool, but we won't take time to look at the Vue stuff. what we're going to look at is create React app. So create React app, there's a few different ways to start this. My favorite way right now is just with Yarn. Yarn now has a new command called create that you can run yarn create and then React app and then the name of your application. So you can run this. You have to have Yarn 25 version 0.25 or above to use the yarn create command. The other way that I would suggest doing it is npx. So npx comes with npm 5.2, so you have npx already. You can run npx create React app space the app name. So those are the two ways that I would suggest using create React app to boilerplate an application. Let's take a look at how to run that and what it actually does, what it actually gives us. So open up your terminal, and I'm just going to clear things out here. Look. All right, so whatever tool you're using for your terminal, and go into just somewhere that you can make a couple like dummy applications. And let's do the yarn command first. So this is a little bit newer, and there have been some students in the past couple cohorts that have had run into issues with this command. So if you ever run into an issue with this, and I'll show you how to test it, make sure that things are working okay. If you ever can't get a project up with this, just go straight to the npx command. Okay, so we'll start with yarn. So yarn create space React app, and that calls the create React app tool. And then whatever you want to name your application. So yarn space, create space, React-app space, and then whatever your app name is. Hit enter. Oh, I added an A, cool. And you should, if things all work out well, you should see this kind of a thing happening on your screen as well. Okay, so this is what it looks like if it installs successfully. You run through these setup steps. It does this cool loading bar, terminal loading bar thing. So that creates a new React app in whatever folder you're in. Then it starts installing packages. So it runs yarn install for you. So it adds all the dependencies. It adds React DOM, React scripts, and React, and then dev dependencies, a few dev dependencies down here. So once all of those are installed, then you're ready to go. And it gives you a message for what you can do now that you've created this React application. So you CD into that new application. I called mine app namia. Then you can run yarn start, yarn build, yarn test, yarn inject, etc. So if you get to this point, if everything installs just fine, and you see this message here, success, created app namia at whatever file structure, and then yarn start, that means that the downloading and the installing part worked. So now you need to make sure that you can start your application. So two things to make sure that you have a successful boilerplate situation: the install, and then CD into your project and run yarn start. So go ahead and do that. And if it opens up in your browser, it takes a minute to kind of spin up, and there we go. So mine started up just fine, no problems there. Did anybody run into any issue with the yarn create command? No issues? Everybody got it running? Cool. That's awesome. Good to hear. Okay, so one is still going. That's okay. Andrew asked a good question. Curious about why you don't like NPM. I actually like NPM just fine. Since we teach React and Yarn is a Facebook team tool, then we just stick with Yarn. Like we always do everything in this class with Yarn. So I'm fine going either way. And I actually have a few projects that I've used NPM with. Like totally fine either way. But for consistency's sake and for just keeping coherency in the class, I just always do Yarn. And NPX is from NPM. I think it's an NPM thing. Yeah, so NPX comes from NPM 5.2 and higher. So this NPM init is basically the same as Yarn create. So yeah, either of these are great options. Not everybody's updated to NPM 6+. So this is more of my go-to if Yarn doesn't work. Okay, but good questions, Andrew. All right. I don't know. Maybe my computer is just fast. I don't know why that happened. Okay, so Kelly asks, I've been using Create React App directly. Let me know if there's a reason I shouldn't. The only reason I would say not to is you have to download this onto your computer just to get it started, where with these new ways to do it, running npx, npm init, or yarn create, you don't actually have to download the Create React App module onto your computer. So that's really the only thing against running this directly. But if you want to go that route, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Cool. All right. So let's stop our servers and cd out of that. And then if you feel brave enough, you can do rm-rf and then your app and delete your application. And I want you to take a minute or two to run one of these other commands, npx or npm. You may have to check npm -- version to make sure that you have version 6 and above to use npm init. If you don't, and you're above 5.2, then use npx create react app my app. So take a minute and create your own application, and at that point we will look into what is actually created with these applications. When it's created, go ahead and cd into it and run yarn start. All right, I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so we should all be at this point. Let's take a look at what was created. So let's open this up in Visual Studio Code first, in your code editor. I've got lots of things open. Wait, I want to close this. Okay, there we go. All right, so open up your new project that you just created. Cool. And then open up your source folder, and you'll see there's a lot of things going on in here. But never fear, most of this stuff you don't need. So we can kind of clear some of these out, delete some of these things, and kind of get to a point that we're a little bit more familiar with. For right now, we're not doing testing. That comes at the end of, we get a week of testing at the end of the backend unit. So go ahead and delete the app.test.js file. We've got an app.js, an index.js, a logo, and this server worker thing, service worker. So we're not going to be doing anything with service workers right now. When this will come into play if you want to create a, oh shoot, what is it? The acronym, PWA. Progressive web application. Sorry, my mind went blank for a second. So if you are interested in creating a progressive web application, then you would want to keep this service worker. And I'll show you where it's actually used, I think in index.js. Yeah. If you're not concerned with that, then don't worry about it. So progressive web apps are basically web applications that you can download to your desktop, or you can download to your phone like a mobile app or like a desktop app, which is kind of, I think this is going to be kind of the future of mobile development. And there's a few reasons that I think that we don't have to get too much into this topic today, but it's good to bring up while we're looking through this folder structure, file structure. So progressive web apps so it's this idea of a web application that meets certain criteria. Part of that criteria is that it can run while your device is offline. And that's why we have this service worker.js file. Service workers are basically bits of code functions that can run that will help your application run when you don't have internet. And they do a couple other cool things too. So you can kind of have some fun with service workers if you get into those. Progressive web apps. So there's this entire list of criteria that your web application has to meet to be considered a progressive web application. If it's considered a progressive web application and you open it up in like your Chrome browser, then Google will say, would you like to download this to your phone, or would you like to download this to your desktop? And you can download your application and basically run it as a mobile app. They're really cool. What's awesome about that, if you think about it, we used to have just web applications and mobile applications. And mobile applications were written in Swift if you wanted to write an app, if you wanted to build an app for iPhones, for iOS, or Java if you wanted to create Android apps. And then we kind of got into this world of things like, wow, my mind is just not working today. What's the mobile one for React? Someone tell me. React Native, thank you. Oh my goodness. Oh, Mondays are just tough. Okay, so then we got into like React Native, where you could build native applications in React, but you still had to kind of break away from your React web application and build it in React Native. Well, now with progressive web apps, you can build your web application and follow that criteria, and then have that downloaded on your users' phones as a mobile application, but it's your web application code. So there's some real power there. I've never actually followed this link. Let's see what it takes us to. Wow, we still really zoomed out. Okay, yeah, making a progressive web app, you can go here and read about this stuff. Cool. We'll see if this becomes the new way to do things. I see that it's gained some traction. We'll see if it goes anywhere. All right, service workers, yay. Go ahead and delete that file. Gone. All right, so what are we left with? Well, we no longer, if you go into index.js, we no longer have this service worker. So go ahead and delete that. And then delete this line. And you can delete all these comments. We'll just read through it real quick. If you want your app to work offline and load faster, you can change unregister to register, and then it would actually register that service worker that we just deleted. Note that this comes with some pitfalls. Learn more about service workers there. Okay, so this is an index.js page that we're really used to, right? We've seen this. We're importing app, and we are rendering app with React DOM.render, and we're grabbing our root div right here. So let's go to app.js, and we had, oh, we can spin this back up again. Maybe we can't. Okay. Should be able to run yarn start again. If you're having the same issue, can't get past this file to compile, failed to compile. What? In source, new app / source. Oh, I need to save files. I'm so used to Code Sandbox just running everything without me saving files. There we go. So in our app.js, we have the code for this spinning React thing. So you can delete all of that. Inside the header, delete it, save your file. Now it's gone. Now we are at the point that we're ready to build our application. The other cleanup part too is all of this CSS. You'd want to clear all that out. Index.css just has some, oh, that's cool, code blocks. You can take away the code block one if you're not going to be styling blocks of code. Okay, and there, now you're at the point that we've gotten you to in your old applications. And yeah, now you're ready to build out your project. You are now boilerplated. Woohoo! Yay. So when you work for a company that has a large application, and you're working on some enterprise app with lots of pages, lots of features, lots of like maybe a couple hundred components, sometimes you'll have like a template for new features or for a new page that you'll just bring in and all the boilerplate code is written for you, where it would be more than just like this index.js. It would have specific styling. It would have some templated JSX. So that's one way that you might encounter or use boilerplate. Most of the time when you're just starting a new project, we talk about boilerplate being where we're at here. Oh, sorry, the last thing we can do is delete the logo and delete the logo SVG. Cool, any questions on boilerplating or create React app? Cool, so here's a couple questions. Hamza tells us, do not do rm-rf. That's probably good advice. I think you can just do rm-r and it's more safe. But I wasn't going to do anything done with this, so I did it. I'm a rebel. All right, I tried to update my npm and got, please try running this command again as root administrator. Npm cache clean. So when this happens, run sudo and then the command. I assume that's what we got in here. Things got updated. Sudo runs it as admin. Yes. Pretty pleased with the cherry on top. That's funny. Imperio. Oh, you guys are awesome. Cool, glad that got resolved. Does iOS support PWAs? I believe so. I'd have to look into it a little bit more, but yeah, I believe you can download a progressive web app as an iOS application. Yay, so, oh, just as of a year ago. Progressive web apps on iOS. Neat. Neato, gang. So yes, iOS supports that. Will we be covering PWAs? No, we won't. They're not very used yet. Again, we'll see what the next, I would say it would take 2 years-ish to see if it's going to take over native applications. Why did my app crash when I deleted service worker and app.test? So one thing that could be happening is in your index.js, you could be still importing from that file, from that service worker file. So, but as your app will tell you, there is no such file or directory. So you have to delete that, and you have to delete this because that's where it was being used. We imported service worker, so you have to delete the import and where it's being used, and then make sure that you are saving your files as well. I had a problem not saving my files. Now, no problem. And then again, for your logo in your app.js, we were importing logo up here on line 2, so I deleted that. And then that was being used right here on line 9. Well, it was 10 before. So just deleted the entire header. And now I'm not importing anything from those 2 files. And then again, just make sure that you save your code, your files, and you should be good to go. Okay, let's see. Oh, do we teach this? Don't ever delete files using your terminal. Bad. There. Now it's consistent. Should we always delete the test file for now until you know how to do TTD? You don't have to. You can keep the test file in there. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to cause any errors. It gets run in, let's see, when you run yarn test, then it runs React scripts test. So if you, at this point, if you try to run yarn test, then I think it'll just say there's no tests found. No tests found related to files changed. So even without a test file, it doesn't break anything. Okay, good questions. Ooh, 15 minutes ago. So that is this stuff here, which that's, I don't know, some VS Code package. I don't use VS Code that much. I don't even know how to find extensions. Here we go, extensions enabled. It's one of these, I'll find a list for you. If someone knows, maybe it's Git Lens. It's one of these Git ones. That seems about right. Oh, come on, show an example of what it is. Maybe it's not. Anyways, it's some extension. If someone knows, help us out. I don't remember. Oh, Git Lens. Okay, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come talk about prop types. I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Okay, break time's over. Come back to your seats. I think we can get rid of this guy. That one. Okay. Cool. We are ready to talk about prop types and type checking. To start off with this, who can help us learn what type checking is? Who can give a quick explanation on what type checking is? All right, type checking. It checks to see the type of the prop you're using. Cool. Check if the value is a string, number, object, array, or Boolean. A for testing. When you check the type, shrug emoji. Yeah, that's like literally what it is. A way to make sure that John B. Dumb doesn't get credit cards. Oh man. Making sure the input is the correct type, e.g. string, Boolean, etc. Turns JS into a bit more strictly typed language. Yep. So JavaScript is a loosely typed language, which means you can say const A equals the string hello world. And then later you can say A equals, and then like the number 10. And then later in your file, you can say A equals, and then some array. So A, when it first is created as a string, there's no problem later in your file changing that type of for that variable. So, but if you're type checking, then when you change A, your const A from a string to a number, then you'll get a warning in your console that says, hey, A is no longer a string, it's now a number. And you told me to expect this to be a string. So I'm just warning you now, it's not a string anymore. And this is important for a few different reasons. Let's take a look at the rest of these comments. Type checking is like strongly typed variables in other languages. Validating. Ooh, I like that word. Type checking is the way we validate data we're receiving from props. Awesome. So that's specifically how we use type checking in React with prop types. So JS plus prop types equals TypeScript. Almost. This is a little bit misleading in that you can use JS plus prop types and by itself. So prop types is just a TypeScript is a little bit more than prop types and JavaScript. So TypeScript actually lets you even type check inside functions. So if you build a function, you say this function is going to return an array, then you can specifically type check the return of that function. So if you ever run that function and it doesn't return, or if you write that function in such a way that it doesn't return an array, then you start to get warnings with TypeScript. Can't quite do that with prop types. This is like JavaScript is very loosely typed language. Add prop types. Now you're a little bit more strict. Go into TypeScript and use this how it's supposed to be used. And now you have the complete package. Prop types, I think, is like a middle step. Yeah, seriously. When you're just trying to figure out what you like in your ideal significant, hey, perfect, CJ, that is right on. Cool. So let's take a look at prop types. Oh, one more question before we jump into the code. Why do we use prop types? Why do we want to do type checking in a JavaScript application? John says this will help in debugging and also help in avoiding bugs in the future. Absolutely. How though? Why? How does it help us avoid bugs in the future? What is it about type checking that gives us that benefit? Because as an app grows, type of props become messy. Yeah, so scaling is an issue, right? There's always going to be side effects to scaling. Whenever you make your app bigger and bigger and bigger, you're going to have problems. And type of props become messy. Maybe you've built a component, a reusable component for, let's just say, a table. So you build a table component that's reusable, and you want all the developers on your team to use this table, this component, anytime they need a table, anywhere in the application. So when other people start using your components that you've built and maybe adding small features here and there, if you've been using prop types and you've been type checking everything that's coming into this component, then it helps keep everything consistent. So let's say you have prop type or props dot table header, and you're expecting that to be an array. Someone might try and send in props dot table header as a string, right? Or maybe you're expecting it to be an object, and someone might send in a string. Well, that's going to break your component. And so as things grow, types of props definitely become messy. You know exactly what data you're passing. Yep. To know how your app works before it goes live. Yeah, and this is a big thing with type checking. One of the biggest advantages to type checking is when you're in a development environment, you run your application and you start to get errors in development mode that maybe you wouldn't see otherwise until it goes live. So in production, there's a lot of what we call runtime errors with JavaScript applications, which means in production, users are using your application and they run into some bug. That's a runtime error. So type checking and prop types help us to avoid more and more runtime errors. Yeah, so I love all of these. Gives you better error messages, additional failsafe to ensure you're working with the right kind of data. Yeah, you force compliance to types. With using prop types, you still need to test. Absolutely. Yep, we still test when we're using prop types. Prop types help get us part of the way there. Testing helps us get the rest of the way to there to having safe applications in production. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at prop types. Yay. Great job, guys. That was awesome. So here is the official documentation on type checking with prop types. And the React team tells us right away, as your app grows, you can catch a lot of bugs with type checking. So for some applications, you can use JavaScript extensions like Flow or TypeScript to type check your whole applications. But even if you don't use those, React has some built-in type checking abilities. To run type checking on props for a component, you can assign a special prop types property. So the way that this works in code is you take your class and you're going to assign a special prop types property to your class. So here we've got greeting, and we assign the prop types object to the class greeting. And then you can do this with functional components as well. And then we build an object on this with this stuff right here. So we'll talk about what this part is. Let's open up, I'm going to do this in the Star Wars application we just built. And forgive me for not getting my images working. I didn't even think about that as I was making the solution video. But yeah, I don't have images here for some reason. I don't know why. I just pulled it in exactly like you guys did. So we're not going to worry about that. Okay. So let's bring prop types into this Star Wars component. It's a really simple component, or really simple application. This is what you guys built on Friday. So let's take a look at our app.js. And the first place that we're passing props down from one component to another is right here on characters list. So we're going to go into characters list, and we're going to add that special property, characters list.prop types, to type check this prop right here. So we're going to go into character list, and actually no, I don't want to give this code out because we're trying not to let students and other cohorts see these projects. This video will be available, so maybe we shouldn't use this project. I didn't think about that. Okay, we'll go to something different. We'll go to our to-do app from last week. Woohoo! Not as fun, but that's okay. So here, I'll give you this code, and you guys can do this along with me. All right, so our to-do app that we built last week, it's got a couple places that we're sending props down. So let's go to our to-do list first. So we're going to go to our to-do list, and before we export, we're going to say to-do list dot prop types equals this object. Now part of this too, as we saw in here, we need to import prop types from this prop types dependency, from this package. So we actually have to go to our dependencies and add prop types as a dependency. So click on add dependency, find prop types. Now we have prop types added in here. Then when you are done with that, we can, let's do this below React. So right below where we're importing React, we're going to import capital prop types from prop slash types or dash types. Okay, so we've imported that. We've got our prop types property on our to-do list component. Now all we want to do is look at whatever's coming into props, whatever props that we are using here in this component, we want to add a property on this object for that prop. So the first one I see is to-dos. So I'm going to add a property here for to-dos. So what is to-dos in this application? It's an array. Perfect. So we're going to say prop types capital P. We're going to grab what's up here, what we just imported. Prop types capital P dot array. Yay, we got prop types. So we are right now ensuring that, or not ensuring, because this only gives us a warning. It doesn't actually block our application. But we will get a warning if props.todos is ever passed down as anything other than an array. So for example, let's open this up in a new window and inspect this, pull up our console. Okay, I always forget the key thing. I'm the worst at that. All right, let's change this to an object. And let's go back to our window here. And let's take a look at the warning that we get when we have a prop type that doesn't match what's actually passed down. So this warning says, failed prop type. Oh no. Invalid prop to-dos of type array supplied to to-do list, expected an object. So this takes a minute to kind of think through this sentence. So let's break this down. Our prop type failed, so we've got the wrong data coming in. We told to-do list to expect an object, right? So the component to-do list was expecting an object for our to-dos prop. But instead, the prop to-dos of the type array was passed down. So this is a little bit weird, a little bit cryptic, but you get used to these warnings pretty fast. So invalid prop to-dos, so prop.todos is invalid because the type array was supplied to to-do list when it expected an object. We told to-do list to expect an object. We passed in an array. So let's change that back to array and refresh our code. And there we go. No more prop type warning. Don't worry about this prop type warning. Perfect. Let me see if there's any questions at this point. Yes, we have to install it. We did that. That was probably asked right before we got to there. Let's see. Okay. Remember that first prop types after to-do list is always a lowercase p. Yeah, this is always weird. So this has to be lowercase p. This technically, this is a default export, right? We're importing a default export. We don't have curly braces around this. So technically we can name this whatever we want and it will work just fine. But every single project I've ever seen has done capital P here, probably just to not confuse us with the property, the special property that we're passing to to-do list here. So yeah, keep that. Don't try to do to-do list dot prop types. It's not actually going to type check for you. Keep this one lowercase. That's the important one. This one's foobar. We can name what we want. Conventionally, we see capital P for this. So good point. Thank you, Nathan. All right. Let's take a look. really fast at the list of different types we can have passed down to a component. So here's all the prop types. So we can have any of the specific JS types. We can say array, we can say Boolean, function, number, object, string, and then symbol. So we can pass down any of those specific JS types. Then we can pass down nodes. So we can type check for nodes. So an actual JSX node. We can pass down an entire React element as a prop if we want. So we can we can type check elements. You can declare a prop as an instance of a class, and you can type check the instance. I don't know that I've really seen that happen very often, if ever, but you can type check it since you can pass it down. So let's take a look at some of these specific ones here, and then we'll come into some of these more complicated ones down below. Once we take a look at these, the kind of the simple, straightforward ones, we'll take a break before we jump into the other ones. So let's see, toggle completed, add clear, handle is checked. So let's type check this is checked prop that we're passing down. So let's go to our to-do form. And I want you to type check this one. So below your function here and above your export, add your class property or your component property, prop types, and type check the is checked prop. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. All right, so we will move on. So what we should have is something like to do form dot prop types is an object, and we're checking the is checked prop. So props dot is checked. What are we going to do after? What are we going to type after this? After is checked? Yeah, prop types dot boolean. Perfect. But you have to have that many O's or it doesn't work. So prop types capital P boolean. Oh, and we're getting an error because prop types is not defined. So don't forget to import prop types from prop dash types. And there we go. I wonder if that other warning goes away. Let's see. Nope. You provided a check prop to a form field without a non-change handler. This one. Okay. Yeah, don't worry about this warning. It's because we're not handling this. We don't have a handle change here. So we're controlling this input, but we don't have an on-change handler. So that's the only reason that we get this error. What we don't want to see is, let's say you passed in string. Hey, this is checked should be a string. We don't want to see this error right here. Failed prop type. Invalid prop is checked of type Boolean passed to supplied or to supplied to do form when it expected a string. So we told to do form to expect a string for is checked, and a Boolean was passed down as the prop. So props.isChecked was passed down as true. We told to do form that we're expecting it to be a string. So we don't want to see this error right here. Okay, awesome. This works for objects. Again, all the kind of main types that we get with JavaScript: array, Boolean, function, number, object, strings, symbols, nodes and elements, and even instances of a class. So take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll look at some more of these more complicated structuring of our prop types. Right, welcome back. Let's finish this day up. Woohoo! Okay, type checking. Just gonna close that one. Okay, let's go back to our to-do list because, well, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you one more reason that type checking and using prop types is really, really helpful. And that is for future development, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for coworkers that are going to come in and use components that you've built. What I like to think of for prop types, not only do they help us avoid a lot of bugs and errors before we push our components to production, it also kind of tells a story for this component, right? So if I go to my to-do list, which is a little bit smaller component, it's just got, I believe it just has 2 props, right? So we've got props.todos, which is an array, and props.toggle completed. So if I, oh, well, that's not what I wanted. Copy. So let's add toggle completed into our prop types list here. And this is prop types.func. So now for this component, I've got every prop that I'm using. I have a property on my prop types object. So this prop types object is pretty good for this component right now. So if someone were to come in and want to reuse this to-do list or maybe do some work inside this, well, let's talk about reusing this first. So let's say someone wants to take this to-do list component, use it somewhere else in our application. They can look really quickly just right here to see exactly what it's going to take for this to-do list to work. It's going to take a to-dos prop and a toggle completed prop, right? So this makes it really easy for them to go into a component and pass in the correct props. Because we've told the story of what this to-do list is expecting right here. Now, if they come in and want to do some work on this component, then they know, again, they know exactly what prop types are expected and what those types are expected to be. So they wouldn't come in and say, they wouldn't try and do like a header of props.toggle completed. Because it's a function, right? This isn't a string. And we're telling them right here in the prop types. That's funny, that didn't even like do anything. So prop types help people and you. A lot of times you're going to come back into components you've built 2 months down the line and you've worked on 3 other features and you're like, I don't remember to-do list. Like, I don't remember all the props exactly. So without this component here, or without this prop types object here, it's a lot harder to just look at your code and say, this is what I need for this component. It's easy right here because we can see the 2 places we're using props, but I've worked with components that had 20 plus props passed to it. And when it gets to that point, having this list and knowing exactly what's expected on props is really helpful. But this is only like sort of helpful so far. So who can give us a spoiler for what we're going to look at next and how we're going to take this prop types object and make it even more helpful for our future selves or for other developers? We're going to get to this in just a minute. Oh, shape almost. Yeah, we are going to look at shape in just a second. There we go. Array of, perfect. And then we'll do shape inside our array of. So why this is not like 100% helpful yet, we're not quite to the point we want it to be, is we know that to-dos is an array, but it's an array of what? Is it an array of numbers? Is it an array of objects, strings? Like what's inside this array? We don't know just by looking at this, so we have to do some detective work to figure out what are these to-dos. We don't want to do detective work. We're lazy. By the way, when I say that we're lazy, don't take that the wrong way. Like, don't do bad shortcuts in your code. I only say developers are lazy when I am suggesting a good shortcut. So I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression from that. So there is a way to specify what is inside our array. Now, generally, when you're building data for a front-end website, or for a website, you will be given an array of data, and 95% of the time, that array will have similar objects inside of it. So most of the time, you're not ever going to get an array that has a string for the first element inside it, and then the second element is an object, the third element is another array. Your arrays will generally be an array of the same exact thing. So knowing that that's the case, we can use this function called array of and pass in the prop types of what we're expecting to be inside our array. So if we had an array of numbers, this is how we would prop type that array of numbers. This is how we would type check that array of numbers. We would say prop types.array of, and then we would say pass in prop types.number. So right here, this is specifying that we are expecting an array of numbers. So for our project, though, our to-dos are not numbers, they're objects. So when we pass this array down, we're passing down an array of objects. So let's go here. And instead of array, we're going to type in array of, and we're going to say prop types dot object. And we'll go make sure that we're not getting any weird errors. Okay, cool. So again, ignore the type check one, or the checked one. So that's still working. We're passing down an array of objects. But this still isn't quite good enough. You saw a couple people hint at that we're going to use this shape thing. So what is shape? Can someone tell me what shape is with prop types? Ooh, it's not what the array is composed of. In this case, it is. But in general, what is shape? Yeah, I like this answer, Hamza. You can define the way an object looks. So you can say, instead of saying object, you can say, we're going to supply to-do list with an array of objects that have the shape. And then this is another function, and you pass in an object here. And then we're going to build an object of prop types that is going to exactly match our data. So we're passing an object down that has the shape of 3 properties that are task, ID, and completed. So I go into my list, and I pass in task, and I pass in ID, and I pass in completed. And then for each of these, the value is the type, the prop type for each of these things. We're going to type check each of these things. So let's go look at our data. So task is a string, ID is a number, and completed is a Boolean. So task again was a string, ID is a number, and completed is a Boolean. So now, at this point, I feel really good about anyone coming to to-do list to do any kind of work and knowing exactly what is being passed down on this to-dos array. So on our to-dos array, we have an array of objects with this specific shape. Every object in here should have a task and ID completed of these types. So if you go to your data and we turn this into a string, oh, that's not what I wanted. Then when it pulls up, we get our prop type error. So let's look at this one more time. This is a little bit different because now we've got this brackets here. So invalid prop, to-dos, the first element in our to-dos array, .id, is a string instead of a number. And that's exactly what happened. We changed the first one in the array to a string instead of a number. So now we're getting very specific on what has failed our prop typing, our type checking. So go back and fix that. If that were to come in as a string instead of a number, and this was from the database, then you would go to your, maybe you're the full stack developer and you're doing the database and the front end website. You would have to figure out why your database is returning ID as a string. Or if you're like me and you're just front end developer, then you go to your back end guy and say, hey, this data's wrong, go fix it. And then they go fix it and make your life better. I have a lot of respect for back end developers because dealing with all that data is definitely hard work. Okay, that is to-do list is completely done and type checked. What's cool with shape and array of is, let's say our task was another object. We could just nest a whole new object right inside here. And I don't know, say we have a name with prop type string and something else with the prop types shape, another object. This can go as nested as we need to handle all of the data that we could get passed down here. We'll just back that out though, because it is a string. Okay, so let's go into to-do component and let's type check our to-do component with these two things that are being passed in here. So this is a new situation that you haven't seen. So I want you to work on it for a couple minutes, see if you can get to-do type checked, and then I will come back and we'll talk about it. Okay, should be pretty close to finishing up with that. So let's go take a look at to do. And then there are a couple questions that I'm going to come back to. All right, so to do dot lowercase prop types. It's funny, someone said that prop types is beginning to look like prototype, probably because prototype is like right in front of your face as you're typing. The number of times I've tried to autocomplete prop types and it does prototype. It's ridiculous. All right, so to do we have, ooh, look at this. So this is kind of nice. So we've already pulled out toggle completed and to do from our props. So we can't look in our JSX for props dot something because they're right up here. So we've got our to do object, which we're going to build out in just a second. And then we also have our toggle completed, which is a function. Functions are my favorite. So prop types, building out prop types for every single component gets tedious. It's super good to do, but it just is like more prop types, especially when you have to build out the shape and you're like nested 5 objects in. You're like, why was the data designed this way? So just fair warning, prop types becomes one of those tedious tasks that we all know is really good to do, and we do it because of that, because we know. We don't like doing it, but we do it because it's good. Need to import prop types. And okay, so now what is the shape of our to-do? Well, I feel like I just built out the shape for a to-do, right? So I am going to, this is a total React hack, React dev hack. This is my life hack for the day. If I just copy the shape that I built out right here, I can just paste it in right there. There we go. Now I've got my shape. So as long as I did it correctly here, I'm gonna put it in here. Now, you will see a lot of developers do this kind of thing. So let's look in this component and let's see where todos.task is used inside this component. Well, we've got props.todos, and then we're not really using todo.task, right? Okay, so we're not even referring anywhere inside our JSX here. We're not really calling task ID or completed. So you will see quite a few developers not build the shape in kind of this intermediate pass-through component. And they'll just say object. And then where it's actually used is where they'll build the shape. And that's okay. I don't have any problem with you or with developers actually enumerating these values in the component that it is used in. And then in this to-do list, you might even just say prop types.array. To-dos is an array, and then we're not really using it here, so go look in to-do where we're using the array elements. Where that gets a little bit tough, so that's kind of a shortcut that we use. That's another lazy thing that I'm mostly okay with. The only part that it's like a little bit like maybe we shouldn't do that is what if someone comes in here and needs to use to-do.completed or to-do.task. they would have to go in and retroactively build out all of this. So that's where it's a little bit like I can kind of see the argument both ways. I think most people kind of lean towards doing this type of a thing, and then when it's actually used, building it out there. So that's a you personal developer call. You get to decide. Okay, those are the most important ones. We do want to look at whether or not prop types are required, and then we'll just briefly touch on a couple other types that you'll run into. So before we transition into that, I'll look at these quick questions here. How do you handle prop types if the data you're passing down changes? That's a really good question. That's one of the other ones we're going to look at is one of type. So as Alex says, an object that could be one of many types. This is straight, looks like this is straight from the documentation. So we'll look at that in a second. Would you say prop typing every component is good practice no matter how simple a component? Yeah, and most companies will make you do this. If they're not using a type checking system like TypeScript or Flow, most companies, well, even with Flow, you'll still have to do this. So yes, is destructuring props best practice? It's either way. That's a personal preference thing. My personal rule is if I have to type props dot something more than 3 times, then I will generally deconstruct that. But that's totally up to you. I don't think there's a best practice either way. Does testing replace prop types? Why did React remove prop types from the base React library? So you'll notice that a lot of things with React are built into separate libraries. I think the reason for that is to keep everything as small as possible and as modular as possible. So React Redux, React DOM, React itself, prop types, all of those, that's 5 separate libraries that if you're going to build a React Redux application and use prop types, you have to install all 5 of those dependencies. So that's just kind of the pattern that React has lived by. Does testing replace prop types? It does not. Testing doesn't really test for, well, you do test for what props come in. Yeah, testing gets a little bit more complicated than just the props coming in. So like which function gets called when you click on this button and what happens, and is the component mounting correctly? Are you making the correct API call when the component mounts? So it does not replace prop types. Okay, you said you'd use this even with Flow. If you're using TypeScript, does that generally eliminate the need for this? I haven't seen, I said that specifically for Flow because I've used Flow with React. I've only used TypeScript with Angular, and that was a few years ago. Okay, let me think. So yeah, we still use it with prop types for that project. I imagine it's going to be the same with React. So no. I think with prop types, I think you're just always going to see prop types in every React project you do. Every like large organized React project you build. Okay, good questions. Let's take a look at is required. So let's say I go to, let's just stay right here in this to-do. And let's say we're going to make up a new prop type. Let's say this prop is required. And I don't know, what prop type should we do? Let's do prop types dot element. Let's do something fun that you don't see very often. If we have a prop type that's required, in other words, in order for this app to work without it breaking, we have to have this prop passed down to this component. If it's required, we can inform ourselves or other developers that it is in fact required. Now, we know that we're not passing this weird prop to this component, right? So we should be getting an error, and we are. So here's our is required prop type error. Failed prop type, the prop type, this prop is required, is marked as required in to do, but its value is undefined. So we've never passed this in. So our app is going to give us a warning saying, oh, it's like on Jurassic Park. You forgot the magic word. That's what I think of this one. Think of when I see this error. Okay, we're not ever going to pass that one down, right? This prop is required. So let's take a look at our application. And if we don't pass down a to-do into this prop, are we going to run into some problems? So let's do this. Let's go to our to-do list, and let's just remove our to-do, and let's see if that breaks our code. Oh, definitely broke our code. Why did it break our code? Let's take a look at the error. So cannot read property completed of undefined. So if we go into to-do, we see props.todo, right? Props.todo.completed. So if we don't pass a to-do object to this component, then that becomes undefined. So undefined, there's no property called completed on the undefined thing in JavaScript. So cannot read property completed of undefined. So undefined.completed is not a thing, and we get an error. So it's pretty safe to say that our to-do is required, right? At this point, what would happen if we don't pass in IDs? In this component, we're not using ID, so we don't really need an ID for this. So for task and completed, we would say is required at this level, but our app's going to run just fine if we don't pass that ID in. Let's go back to our list and pass in our to-do. Then toggle completed is functions, especially callback functions like this, are usually required just because it's required for making this click work. For example, if we didn't have this, if we had it not required, and then we decided not to pass in toggle completed, and then we tried to click on something, our app is broken. It doesn't throw an error, but it's broken in the sense that we can't perform that functionality. So toggle completed definitely is required. All right, so prop types. Put them in all your components. Make sure you're using shape and array of rather than just saying prop types.array or prop types.object, unless you're in one of these weird like pass-through situations. I'm okay with you doing this. It might be better just to build these out just to get the practice. Then when you have a required prop type, if you've got a prop that's required to make your function work, make sure to use is required. This will take a little bit of time for you to really understand when not to use is required. So it's just going to take some practice and going through those errors and, oh, I should have added is required. So just know that I don't expect you to be perfect at adding is required right off the bat. Okay, last little bit here. There are a few more things that we can do with prop types. So as we saw above, we can use one of type. So what if you have a prop that it could be a string or it could be a number? That happens sometimes with IDs. We had, at my last job, we had objects that had an ID property, and old objects that were created a long time ago in an older system had string IDs and then, or had number IDs, and then later we had string IDs. So what do we do for that ID field? Well, you just pass in prop types dot one of type. It's a function, and you pass in an array of the different types that you could possibly have for that thing. What if we want to ensure your prop is limited to specific values? So, for example, this prop type says you can have one of either the string news or the string photos. If you pass in the string articles, then you're going to get a warning, failed prop type warning. So you can, this is called enumerating values, enum. You can enumerate that you only want these two values passed to that prop. Or more, you could have 10 in this array. Inside here, you could do prop types.shape, and you could define a shape for that enumerated value. Array of, we talked about. You could do object of. I haven't really ever seen this. Mostly you'll see shape so that you can define the actual properties of the object. We talked about that. We talked about is required. The kind of asterisk of type checking is prop types.any. If I see this in your code, I will personally kick you out of Lambda school. Just kidding. Don't do that though. Don't worry about custom validators. And yeah, I think that should be good. Okay, any last questions? Okay, ID is the parameter for toggle completed. So we wouldn't want to check if ID exists. It's a parameter for toggle completed. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is getting into, let me show you what he's talking about here. So if we go to our app and we go to toggle completed. So he's saying that ID right here is a parameter for this function. Prop types only type checks what you're passing down as props. It doesn't type check parameters for functions. It doesn't type check returns for functions, anything else like that. It is only prop types, and this is why I said JS plus prop types doesn't actually equal TypeScript. TypeScript would type check this ID to make sure that this was a number and not an object or string. Prop types does not get to that granular level there. So good question. But yeah, that is more of like a TypeScript or Flow type setup where all we're doing is checking only the props types that we're passing into components, not anything that goes up with callback functions that we're calling later. Okay, would it be a bad idea to have prop type.any as a copy paste placeholder? No, just because you're going to forget and you'll have a runtime error because you've got prop types.any that you forgot to replace with what it actually is. But good question. Okay. Again, today we're starting the React Instaclone project. Got all the instructions here. Our focus for today is that you can demonstrate the ability to use Create React App to boilerplate your application, use prop types to type check your data, and then default props. We didn't talk about default props. Let's get to that one tomorrow. I don't want to go over too much today. So don't worry about default props. We'll talk about that right at the beginning of class tomorrow. And then you can add that into your projects tomorrow. So you've got your project set up, and then each day this week, so when you come to this repo, you'll see that we've got a README, we've got a day 2 README, day 3 README, and day 4 README. And so today's instructions are in just the readme.md, and then tomorrow, day 2, 3, 4, etc. for the rest of the week. So for each day, you're going to have a focus, you're going to have a project set up, or like where your project should be as of the end of yesterday, and tasks for the day. So get your project set up, follow these tasks. You're basically just going to display the data that is inside dummydata.js, and make sure that your folder structure is correct. You're passing that data down to the correct components, and type checking with prop types through that whole process. Okay, awesome. I will see you guys tomorrow, and yeah, have a wonderful Monday afternoon.